Welcome to our anti-fraud round session, where we are going to be exploring the fundamental difference between human fraud examiners and AI system, highlighting the respective strengths and weaknesses and the biases related to these approaches. We will be discussing real-world example, speaking about human biases and machine learning biases, and how this can influence the fraud investigation and lead to unfortunate results. But before we get started, as per the ACFE, fraud examination is the process of resolving fraud allegation from inception to disposition, highlighting all the details that we need to do and the processes for us to do forensic analysis using the investigation technique to uncover the financial misconduct. So for you as a fraud examiner, you need to go and obtain the information, analyze the information, and create a conclusion. Are you using human intelligence for you to be able to do the whole process, or you are using AI, machine learning, you are using different kind of technology in the digital age we are living in? We are going to explore both approaches. We are going to be speaking about how fraud human intelligence can do the work and how machine learning can do the work, and what are the advantages and disadvantages for both. So let's get started. All of us, we are working as a fraud examiners, using our knowledge and experience and skills and our different cases that we have handled before and all the training that we have learned over the years to be able to solve fraud cases. But unfortunately, there are advantages and disadvantages when we are trying to solve fraud cases using our own mind. We call this the fraud examiner mindset. So the fraud examiner mindset will highlight the different mindset that fraud examiner can use to their advantage to solve fraud cases, and also what are the disadvantages or what are the biases that can happen when we are using our mind. They say fraud examiner usually have unique skills to solve fraud cases because it relies on different kind of experience, different kind of expertise. Over the years, fraud examiners, they have equipped themselves with so many knowledge and understanding of the different fraud pattern and investigation technique. Also, fraud examiners, they have the ability to have the proper judgment and intuition to be able to identify different pattern, different behavior, and look at the different documents and identify fraudulent activities. Also, fraud examiners, they have the ability to make ethical decisions. They have the ability to look at the situation and navigate ethical dilemma when they are handling fraud cases and follow the international professional standards when we are handling fraud cases. However, also fraud examiners, they have all these abilities, they have certain limitations. And these limitations will come back to us as a human. Because we are a human fraud examiner conducting the investigation, there are some biases that can happen. One of it is related to subjectivity. When we are handling cases, definitely our personal experience, our own thinking can influence the situation. And based on a very interesting book called The Law of Human Natures by Robert Greene, we are going to discuss some of these human biases and misjudgment that can happen when we are making decisions related to investigation. They are related to cognitive shortcuts and mental issues that can happen with individuals. They are making decisions over a short period of time to be able to come up with a conclusion. So let's go over a summary of these biases that we can experience when we are handling fraud cases. So bias number one, confirmation bias. All of us, we have that, which is the tendency to search and think and favor information that confirm our pre-existing belief or hypothesis. And we ignore anything that contradicting what we think about. And this bias will influence your investigation because it will reinforce the existing belief that you have and will lead us to overconfidence in our own opinion. All of you, you experience that when you're conducting investigation. You believe that this person is committing fraud. You believe fraud is done in a certain way. You look at the evidence and based on your experience, you conclude certain conclusion without looking at all the facts. Then you are trying to find anything that can support your conclusion. You are trying to ignore anything that's not aligned with your conclusion, and you are only trying to find evidence that's supporting whatever you believe in. This is a very dangerous approach. Why? Because in that case, you are not looking at the facts, you are trying to fit the facts with your own theory. The other thing that can happen, number two, which is what we call the availability issue. Usually we make judgment based on the information that's easy for us to obtain, that are available. And we ignore the information that are not available. So when you are handling fraud investigation, you say, what evidence do we have? You look at the evidence that you have. And based on that, you say, let's quickly make conclusion based on this evidence that we have. And based on that, you are not going to go look at what the evidence that you don't have. You are going to overlook the issue. Or you are going to say, what kind of fraud cases I handled before, what information I have available in my memory. And I will rely on the recent memory and exposure that I have to focus on the issue rather than looking at the actual facts and going and digging for the different patterns that can happen. So this is why they always say, it's not about what is in front of you. We call this hidden in plain sight. It's what is missing. What is missing here? This is what we need to focus on. The third thing, which is we call it the anchoring bias. The anchoring bias will happen when we have tendency to rely heavily on the first piece of information that we encounter. We call it the anchor. So the first piece of information will say, based on it, this is what happened. We make all the subsequent decisions and judgment based on that. And this is what's going to influence all our decision and is going to maybe lead us in a different direction. And so many of us, we experience that. We go collect the evidence. We collect the information. We go interview individuals. And the first information we collect, based on it, we can create a conclusion, which is wrong. You should not make any conclusion about the fraud case unless you have collected all the evidence. You have interviewed all the individuals. Not like you interview two individuals and these two individuals, they say, this is the person who committed the fraud. Then you say, khalas, based on this information, I'm going to rely on it and I'm going to go with that direction. It's always important for us to look at all the evidence and all the information and not rely on the first information we have. Why? Because maybe the first information we have is not accurate. This is why they say when you are conducting fraud investigation, you need to go and follow different approach, which is first you obtain the information. So you don't rely on it, you just obtain it. Then you go to the confirmation stage. So the first stage, we call it information seeking. We are obtaining the information. We are collecting the information. Then we go to the next stage, which is the confirmation stage, where we try to confirm the information that we have obtained. Then later, based on this confirmation, we can create an initial conclusion. So this will help us avoid the issue of relying on the first piece of information and go and move all the whole direction of the investigation with that piece of information. Now, number 4 is stereotyping. Sometimes for us as individuals, we go and categorize individuals or categorize groups or certain characteristics or certain attributes. And we go and create a general assumption and general theory about their behavior, their attributes, their intentions, and their actions. And this is a big issue. So if you have, based on your experience, handled certain fraud cases in certain countries with certain groups in certain way, you can't go and generalize this and say, if I'm going to handle the same group in another organization in a different situation, they are going to do the same or they are going to behave the same. But unfortunately, we always try to look for similarity because we are human. And this is why we try to say, okay, let me, what we call do labeling. Let me go take certain group or certain behavior or certain individuals or certain pattern and let me label it. So every time I see it, I will say this is again what's happening. This stereotyping can lead us to really big bias when we are conducting investigation. Every time we are handling investigation, we need to look at it as a fresh, new investigation. And not go and say, we need to look at this investigation and see if it's similar to previous investigation. Every individual we are interviewing is different. Every situation is different, and every organization, culture, and operation and processes, they are different. Now, number 5, we call it overconfidence bias. Sometimes, we overconfidence with our overestimating our ability, our knowledge, our judgment, our experience. And based on that, we say, I know how this happened. I can decide exactly and fully understand the situation without looking at the information in front of me. And that can lead us to, unfortunately, the wrong conclusion and the wrong outcome. Always, you should not say, I know how the fraud happened. No, you should ask, what are the evidence telling me? You should not go and fill up the gap from your own knowledge. You should look at the evidence. If the evidence is not showing us all the facts related to the case, we need to go collect the facts rather than we assume based on our experience and knowledge what happened. You always need to conclude your investigation based on the fact, not based on your opinion and your thinking. You can say, well, I suspect, I think, I feel, I know. No, it's all about what the evidence are showing me, and based on it, I can come up with a conclusion. But unfortunately, individual working in fraud examination for 20 years, they say, well, I have seen all the types of fraud. No, definitely, fraudsters, they are going to come with a new approach. They are going to do fraud differently. So you should not rely on your way of thinking. You should rely on the facts. Otherwise, you will be, misled by them. Also, when we are conducting investigation, number 6, we need to go and focus on the credibility of the evidence. We need to look at the information that are in front of us, and we need to verify it. So many issues that will happen with the fraud investigators, they don't verify the information in front of them. Any information, someone will give you, for example, a bank statement. You look at it and you believe it's correct. You as a fraud examiner, you should not rely on any piece of information in front of you without validation. Someone will go print a report from the system, and you go say, I'm going to rely on this report. No, you need to verify this report. You need to total the numbers. You need to check if it's coming from the system, from reliable source. If someone gives you a bank statement, you need to send confirmation to the bank to verify that it's correct. Unfortunately, fraud examiners, when they are obtaining evidence, they can be digital or hard copy evidence, they rely on it without verification. Without verification, that can lead to a confusion, because you are trying to rely on the information and then you are coming up with a conclusion without knowing if these information are correct or not. And this happens in big organizations, where someone will go call the hotline and will provide information to the fraud investigation team saying there's a fraud happened and this is the situation and these are the evidence. Fraud investigation should take this information and should verify, are they correct or not, before going and conducting the investigation. We should not launch the investigation unless we have information that are confirmed as evidence related to the fraud, then we launch the investigation. Now, number 7 is about the bias, what we call blind spot. Sometimes for us, we don't see the fact in front of us. We have tendency as a human to recognize certain information and ignore some information. We call them blind spot. We don't look at them, we overlook them because we have never experienced something like this before. And this is what will happen. We have experience over 7-8 years in related to different kind of schemes. Now there are some schemes that we have never experienced, we have never encountered. And this is what we call is the blind spot in our knowledge or experience or our way of thinking. So always very good to have what we call fraud investigation team, where the team is working on the investigation, not one individual only handling the whole investigation. Why? Because they can give you different perspectives. They can give you different way of looking at the situation, different way of approaching the evidence and the information and the facts that we have. Number 8, which is what we call the attribution bias. The attribution bias is related to the tendency to attribute the success to internal factor, like our ability and effort and how smart we are, and attribute any failure related to external factors, like luck or circumstances. And I have seen so many of this with so many investigators who are handling different fraud investigation, where they say, I was not lucky, I was not able to collect the information, I was not able to do it because the system was actually not working properly, or the information were deleted. It was a bad luck for me. They are saying, they are blaming their failure on the system. But when they solve the fraud case, they say, I solved the fraud case because I'm so smart, because I can look at all the facts, because I can achieve this amazing success because of my intelligence and experience and skills. So they are going and emphasizing their success on their effort, and they emphasizing failure on other outside circumstances, which is also not a good approach. But unfortunately, so many investigators, they do that. Now also, what can happen with an investigation team? Number 9 is what we call group thinking. Group thinking is a big issue that can happen in investigation team. When we are discussing the evidence together, sometimes there's a desire for us to confirm to the harmony of the group, to go and decide whatever we want to say is maybe not appropriate if it's contradicting what the group is saying. So in that way, we conform with the group, we say, yes, we agree with you, this is what we should do. Even we know maybe this is not correct. So if you don't have critical thinking inside the group, if you don't have someone who is gonna raise their hand and say, maybe what we are speaking about, there's a different perspective or we need to look at differently, the conclusion can be wrong. And this is a big issue, can happen in so many investigation teams, where the majority of the investigation team, they say this is the direction we need to go to, but someone got a different opinion, but he's afraid to share his concern because he's afraid maybe he's wrong and also maybe he's right. This is why when we have an investigation team, we need to allow everyone to voice their concern and way of thinking to be able to come up to the best conclusion. Not allow certain group, or sometimes the head of the fraud investigation team, he will say this is what we will do, and everyone, they are afraid to challenge the head of the investigation team, and they are going to agree with him, even they know maybe this is not the right approach. So these are some of the biases that can happen while we are making this rapid decision during an investigation. And that can lead to error in a judgment, misunderstanding, or they can lead to the wrong conclusion. The awareness of these biases for us as a fraud examiner is critical in help us making proper decisions. But also, when we are looking at these issues, we need to understand how can we overcome our biases? What can we do to go and overcome all these issues that we face as investigators when we are handling fraud investigation? They say one of the issues that will happen when we are handling fraud investigation, and this is why maybe it will lead to a bias, that we have so much resources. Look at all these folders and files behind me. We have so many resources and so many information what we have to analyze. And because we are doing it manually, we are not using a system, what we have resource intensity. Fraud examiners, they are spending so much time to go over all this information, and they have limited scalability. They will not be able to analyze all this information quickly. And this is why sometimes we ignore some information. Sometimes we overlook some information. So this is one limitation that we have. Another limitation we have is skill variability. Sometimes when we are, as human beings, we don't have all the types of skills at all levels and all expertise to handle different fraud investigations. Maybe we are not expert in the financial part of it, but we are so good in the operation. Maybe we are not expert in the money laundering side of it. Maybe we don't understand the technical IT side of it. And this is what we face when we are handling specific investigation related to specific domain or related to specific area. This is why fraud examiners, they need to expand their knowledge. They need to go and gain more knowledge for them to be able to overcome that. So these are some of the limitations that we discussed. And for us to overcome these limitations, we need to rely not only on our human intelligence, but also we need to rely on artificial intelligence. However, someone can say, so artificial intelligence in that way much better than a human in analyzing the information? We say, not really, not all the time. Human, they are superior to AI in analyzing information, and there are advantages. Even we discussed there are so many biases that can have. Fraud examiners who are conducting investigation as a human, or not as a system, they can have so many advantages. So let's discuss some of the advantages that we have as a fraud examiners, especially as certified fraud examiners. So if you have not earned the CFE yet, the Certified Fraud Examiner Certificate from the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, I highly recommend you to earn this certificate. Why? Because this is the global standard, golden standards in fraud examination, where you understand how you as a fraud examiner, you need to conduct investigation in the proper way, and how can you also use AI and different kind of technology to be able to conduct investigation effectively. So what are the advantages for us to have these fraud examiners conducting the investigation? They say number one is understanding the context and the intent of the person who's conducting the fraud. Usually for us as a fraud examiner, we have the ability to go and understand the context of the case, understand the intent behind the actions of the individuals who did the fraud. We understand the complex relations and motivation and situational factor that led this individual to do the fraud. And this can distinguish between, if this behavior is actually a mistake, if it's non-compliance, or if it's actual fraud case. Sometimes AI don't have that ability to understand the context. The second thing is emotion and empathy. When you are conducting fraud investigation as a fraud examiner, you have ability to speak with the victims, to speak with the witnesses, to understand how they feel. It's not about only analyzing their statement and their facts and their words. Also, we need to understand their feeling. We need to have some empathy with the person who is actually facing the issue related to the fraud, the victims. We need to have some empathy with the fraudsters who were under pressure or under certain circumstances, they have conducted this fraud. We need to provide them with the emotional support for us to be able to build rapport, to build the trust, and navigate the conversation with them effectively to be able to obtain the information that are critical for our investigation. So for us, we can't conduct investigation by having a machine conducting the investigation with these victims and witnesses. A human should be there interacting with them. And we have seen so many organizations who decided to outsource an investigation interview to a machine, and it's not an effective approach. Machines can do so many things, but one of the things that they are not effective in doing is conducting a human-to-human interview. You can't do it machine-to-human interview. You can use machine as a way to help you, but still a human need to interact with a human when we are conducting an investigation, when we are conducting an interview. Now, number 3 is the adaptability to new scenarios and rapidly understanding the fraud landscape. Human investigators, fraud examiners, they can demonstrate their ability to creatively apply their skills to new situations, to emerging fraud techniques, and figure out exactly how they can change their techniques and hypotheses and situation based on the new situation that we have. Usually, AI is limited with that because they can't change their algorithm and situation and all this programming quickly to adapt to new situation. But for us, we can understand if there's a change in the situation, if you have different pattern, and we can look at it while we are conducting the investigation. Number 4 is the complex decision making. Fraud examiners often, they have the ability to make complex decisions based on so many factors, and they can weigh these factors and assess the reliability of the evidence. They can exercise judgment, they can prioritize the evidence, they can make significant finding, they can uncover significant finding, and they have the ability to link all this information in a way that AI will not have the ability to do. Why? Because we can look at the big picture. We can look at the different details. We can understand the context. We can understand exactly how these events are connected. We can listen to different individuals, and based on that, we can analyze the fact and make conclusion. This is a human ability that machine trying to imitate by creating different kind of connections between the information. But a human mind until now is very powerful in analyzing complex situation and making the proper decision and findings related to an investigation. Number 5 is the investigative technique. Usually for us as a human conducting the investigation, we have different kind of investigation technique we can do. We can go do surveillance, we can go do an interview, we can do forensic analysis, we can do evidence gathering, we can go do digital investigation, we can do different types of investigation. We do money laundering, we go tracing. Usually if you want to outsource this to a system, you need to buy maybe 20 systems for them to do all this kind of testing. And in so many situations, these systems are not connected together. Your ability as a fraud examiner to have a combination of all these skills and techniques together to uncover critical situation and capture all this information and then use it in your investigation to come up with a conclusion is very important. Number 6 is the domain knowledge and expertise. Human investigators often they are specialized in certain industries, in certain kind of fraud, and based on that, based on their experience, they can recognize certain pattern. They can look at certain red flags. They can look at how what we are looking at is linked with the regulations, linked with the laws, linked with the system, linked with the policy of the organization. And because they have all this massive experience, they can understand the situation and figure out exactly what is the type of fraud that's happening, which is difficult for a system. The system, you need to teach the system. The system need to look at all this pattern and then program the system for it. Fraud examiner already, based on their knowledge and experience, they are programmed to look and understand all these areas. Number 7, which is very important in my opinion, is what we call collaboration, teamwork, leadership. Effective fraud investigation will not happen by one human doing the investigation, not by one investigator. It's a collaborative between different individuals, different stakeholders, where they have diverse perspective, diverse knowledge. Some individuals are working in the legal department, some individuals working in human resources, some individuals working in finance, and the team, when they come together and they leverage all the collective experience they have, they can uncover complex fraud schemes. And they can be able to identify exactly the fraud case that we have in front of us. So it's very important to have diverse team related to investigation. Number 8 is the ethical consideration. Usually, fraud examiner will be able to navigate the ethical dilemma when we are handling fraud cases. We'll understand, can we obtain this information or we have privacy concern? Can we share this information or we have confidentiality concern? Can we go and look at this information in a certain way and use it as an evidence or not from a legal perspective? Sometimes for a system, it's difficult for them to make these ethical dilemma decisions. For us as individuals, based on a different principle we have learned and professional standards, and based on our experience, we can go and conduct investigation with integrity, where we protect the rights of the individuals, where we conduct the investigation in fairness to all the parties involved, and make sure that we don't actually violate any individual privacy or rights. Number 9 is critical thinking. For us as a fraud examiners, we have the ability to think outside the box. We have the ability to go and analyze the data and evaluate the evidence and create hypotheses based on holistic way of looking at the case and information, to be able to identify inconsistency, to follow certain leads, to develop different strategies. We have the ability to go and look at unexpected pattern and try to look for any evidence supporting this pattern. And sometimes this is very important in sophisticated fraud schemes, for us to use our human mind, our creativity to imagine how the person conducted the fraud, how the person they were able to cover their fraud, how the person they were able to launder the money. So always we can use our mind to think like the fraudster, which is so many systems, it's difficult for them to think like the fraudster. They can think like the investigator. But for us, we have the ability to think like an investigator and think like the fraudster, to be able to figure out how he conducted the fraud. Now, number 10, which is also very important, is communication and presentation skills. At the end of the day, when we are concluding our investigation, we need to go and present the result to the CEO, to the board of directors, to the maybe media, to the legal department, maybe in court. So we can have a machine doing that. We, as investigators, we have the ability to look at all this massive amount of information and decide how we are going to convey the findings, how we are going to explain this complex concept to the stakeholders, how can we present the evidence in the proper legal way, how can we go and verbally or in written communication provide this information to all the parties. How can we show them that the findings that we have came with is based on the evidence and information that we have? So this is why it's really critical for us as a fraud examiner to understand that it's not only machines can do the work, it's critical and important to have a fraud examiner conducting the investigation, which is good news, because the meaning of that fraud examiners are there to stay. They can't replace you with a machine or a system. Always is it critical to have fraud investigators working and have fraud investigation team conducting the investigation. So in conclusion, while artificial intelligence is important to provide us advanced data processing, pattern recognition, automation of fraud detection, still human investigators can bring valuable qualities to the table, with their expertise, with their intuition, with their ethical judgment, with their ability to navigate complex scenarios, to make them unique and suited to handle complex tasks related to fraud investigation. And they can leverage their human strength alongside with the technological advancement like AI and other technologies, for them to be able to uncover fraud and for them to be able to prevent and detect fraud and work against all this financial misconduct effectively, to ensure that fraud will not happen in the future after they uncover all this fraudulent scheme. So this is why you, as a fraud examiner, you need to make sure you take advantage of everything we discuss, to show all the stakeholders, to show the board of directors, the audit committee, that you are very important part of the fraud investigation process. And if they are going to buy all this artificial intelligence system, that doesn't mean that they have to reduce the fraud investigation department size. That doesn't mean that your job is going to be redundant. You are going to work along to all this IT system and all this artificial intelligence and machine learning to be able to help advance the investigation, to make it faster, to make it better, to make it maybe more consistent, and to uncover unusual fraud schemes. But before we get started, let's speak about the definition of artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence refers to simulation of a human intelligence in a machine program performing certain tasks that usually human will use their intelligence to perform, such as visual perceptions, speech recognition, decision making, pattern recognition. We can benefit from all these systems to be able to analyze large amount of data and find unusual connection, which is for us usually as a human is difficult to do. AI system, they can utilize different techniques for them to be able to detect, prevent fraud. So let's discuss about some of these advantages. Why we are recommending fraud investigators to use AI when they are doing their testing. One of the most important things that AI can bring is what we call pattern recognition, where they can analyze vast amount of data to identify any irregularities, to look for any pattern, to look for fraudulent behavior, which is usually for us as a human is difficult to do or is time consuming. The second thing is machine learning algorithm, where we can create training models based on historical data to predict future fraud behavior, to be able to analyze different transactions and look for any fraudulent activity. Another thing that we can look at and use with AI is what we call anomaly detection, where we have a system that can flag unusual transaction or behavior and can figure out what is the normal pattern and what is unusual pattern. But what I'm most interested in, especially when we are working in the fraud domain, is what we call real-time monitoring, where we have a system doing surveillance 24 hours in real time over the transaction and help us uncover all this unusual activity and catch fraud when it's happening in real time. So these are some of the advantages of AI over human, that they can look at massive amount of data. But let's go and take some examples to show how AI can be superior to fraud examiner, to human investigators when they are conducting fraud investigation. What are the skills and what are the advantages that we can get out of the AI system compared to having human investigator? Number one is what we call speed and scalability. Definitely AI can analyze millions, sometimes trillions of transactions in seconds in real time, which is for us as a human is limited. We will not have the cognitive capacity or the time ability to do it in this short period of time. Number two is what we call consistency. For us as a fraud examiner, every fraud examiner got different mindset, different way of looking, different way of analyzing, different way of thinking. Compare when we are using a system like AI, they have the ability to be consistent because they are following certain rules and algorithm, and they are not influenced by emotions or by any other factors that for us as a human usually we are influenced with. So they are going to generate uniform result. They are going to come and give us the same results. Another thing, and we can take advantage of it, number three, we call it predictive analytics. AI system can predict, can forecast potential fraud in terms of looking at the historical data and looking at the future data and looking for emerging pattern, trying to be able to predict what's going to happen in the future, to be able to prevent fraud from happening before happening. Number four is the ability to integrate with big data. AI, they can go and integrate with a big data platform to be able to analyze different data in different platforms and look at diverse sources of information inside our organization and externally to come up and give us a comprehensive conclusion related to all these data they can analyze. They can analyze social media information. They can analyze the news. They can analyze all the information on the internet. They compare them with our internal information and give us really valuable insight. Number five is continuous improvement and adaptability. Usually for us, when we are handling fraud investigation, we are maybe not familiar with the new pattern. We are not familiar with the fraud that happened today in certain countries or the new schemes that fraudsters are implementing. AI system, they can continuously learning and adapting to new fraud tactics, to the evolving behavior, where us as a human, we can struggle with adapting and changing the way of thinking and looking at these new things. We need the training. Compared to the machine, they are training, they are learning, and they are advancing quickly. Number six is reduce false positive. Using AI algorithm, we can go and minimize the false positive. We can get more accurate results because the system is trying to correct themselves all the time and figuring out which transaction is fraudulent or not. And at the end, they are improving the system to be able to get less false positive. What's the meaning false positive? The system identifying transaction as a fraud, but actually is not fraud. So this is where sometimes for us as a human, we look at transaction and we waste so much time in investigating this transaction compared to the system. They can go and identify, is it fraud or not? And if it's fraud, they can send it for investigation. If it's not, they are gonna go and just record the information about it. They say, we have identified transaction, it doesn't look like it's a fraud, and they send it for us to take a second look at. Number 7 is what we call network analysis, fraud network analysis. Today, when we are using AI can look at complex fraud networks, can look at different relations between different vendors, different entity, can help us in figuring out different social connection, can help us in figuring out money laundering schemes where it's happening between different individuals and different entity. They can look for transactional patterns, they can look for communication networks, they can look for behavioral interaction, and they can help us in uncovering sophisticated schemes related to collusion, related to organized crime, related to different individuals working and interacting together. Which is for us as a human, it will take us massive amount of time and energy for us to do. They can look at CCTV camera and identify certain pattern. They can look and listen to all the conversation that happen over our phones and give us summary of what we need to look at. They have the ability to look at massive amount of information and find the connection, find the network, find the individuals who are working together to conduct the fraud. Number 8, which is very important today in the world we are living in, is what we call behavioral biometrics. Today, when you are using your machines to enter, you are using what? You are using your physical biometric. You are using your eye, you are using your finger, you are using a password that you know to enter. All these can be imitated. Someone can imitate your fingerprint. Someone can imitate exactly what you do. Compare with behavioral biometrics, we are looking at understanding the behavior of the user. So we are using advanced AI algorithm for us to figure out and analyze the behavioral biometric of the individuals. What's the meaning of that? We are looking at your mouse movement. We are looking at how you are interacting with your voice, with your hand, with your body, for us to create what we call user profile, digital profile about you. And based on that, we can compare the information in real time to know if this is you who's doing this behavior or not. So AI can help us in deducting anomalies related to unauthorized access, related to fraudulent activities in real time by doing behavioral analysis, which is very important in the world of cybersecurity that we are living in, where cybersecurity today is exceeding 8 trillion. This can help us in reducing the risk related to identity theft and account takeover. And also, AI can help us in making sure that we are measuring our risk in the proper way. Today, we are using what we call machine learning for us to do what we call risk scoring. So AI-driven risk scoring model can leverage machine learning and help us in figuring out exactly what is risk related to fraud in real time. We can assign the scores, we can change the scores based on different factors in real time for us to be able to analyze the data that's coming in, analyze exactly different transaction happening in a dynamic way, and create alerts to identify which one is high risk transaction that we need to address immediately in real time. So these are some of the advantages that we have when we are using AI. We can automate so many of our testing, we can advance, we can make the process faster. But AI systems, with all these advantages, they have some disadvantages, which is, we call it some biases. So let's address some of these biases related to AI, fraud investigation systems. While these systems, they are offering so many advantages, it's critical for us to address what are the issues when we are using this system to avoid them. So let's discuss here some of these issues and give some examples about what can go wrong when you are using the AI system in improper way. The first thing we are going to discuss is related to, number 1, training data bias. Sometimes the information you are giving the system for the system to analyze, we call it the historical data, the training data. Sometimes because these data are biased already, because these data are highlighting fraudulent transaction that it should not highlight, for some reason, maybe because of a human bias, the system will do the same. So in that way, the system is going to use this historical data to come up with the same bias and skewed all the results to create, and reflect all this human bias in the digital world, in the AI system that they are working on. So this is why we need to be careful. They say garbage in is garbage out. If we give the system improper information for them to analyze, or information that are already biased, for example, we give them history of the employees that we hired and which employees we rejected. Maybe they can look at the pattern and say, oh, you rejected certain employees for certain factors, maybe because of their race, maybe because of their age, maybe because of their marriage status, maybe because of their background, and they are going to implement the same system and same algorithm on new employees. Another thing is algorithm transparency. We don't want to have a system, AI system, with what we call black box. Black box is a system where you are going to go and tell the system, please analyze the transaction and give me the result, and the system will say, I analyze the transaction and the result is a fraud. But the system is not explaining, there is no transparency. We don't know why the system concluded it's fraud. This is why this system can cause ethical and legal issues later, because it's not okay for us to use a system where the system is going to label and flag something as a fraud or not without us understanding what is the reason for the decision. This can create bias. If there is an issue with the algorithm, if there is an error in the algorithm, this can go and create different result that we should get, and that can create issues related to the accountability and the trust in the AI-driven system that we are using. So we need to make sure that we are getting a system where the system is going to give us a conclusion and explain to us based on what factors, what red flags, what indicators they came up with this conclusion. Number 3 is what we call overfitting AI models. So overfitting AI models is about creating trained specific data set for us to fit exactly certain pattern. So we say, listen, this is the system. We want you to look at this kind of transaction. We need you to identify this specific pattern. Now, what is the issue with that? In that case, the system will only look at this pattern, will only identify this pattern, and this will not help us in identifying any unusual pattern, any different pattern. At the same time, the system may create so many false positives, because you are telling the system, if you see any transaction and the transaction got a description called fraud, called crime, you need to stop this transaction. So if someone is actually registered for one of my courses and he say, I'm paying for a fraud course to take it with IAD, and now the system will flag it as fraudulent transaction because he should say anti-fraud. But maybe even if he say anti-fraud, because they are looking at the word of fraud, the transaction will be blocked. So this is sometimes what will happen if we train the system to look at certain pattern exactly. This can create so much false positive, and at the same time we will not look at any unusual pattern. Number 4, which is what we call adversarial attacks by fraudsters. So what will happen the minute you implement AI system, the minute you have the system and the system is working and analyzing all this fraudulent transaction, what will happen? This algorithm that you have created for the system to run, the AI algorithm, is gonna be known by the fraudster later, at a later stage, because the fraudster, they are gonna do the fraud and then you are gonna catch them. Then they are gonna discover, okay, you are implementing an AI system to uncover their fraud. So they will try different approaches. They try to do different techniques. Then they figure out where are the weaknesses, where are the gaps in your AI system, in your algorithm, and they will be able to manipulate the process. Because they understand the system is based on what? Based on the input of the data, they are gonna make the decision. So if the fraudster can manipulate the input data, in that way they can manipulate how the system is making the result. And in that way, you think your system is working effectively, while the fraudster is actually attacking your system, taking advantage of it. And we have seen this in so many organizations where they implement face recognition for the employees. The employees figure out exactly how they can do something where the machine will not recognize their face. Or we implement a system to be able to track employees, and employees, they figure a way how they can manipulate the tracking system. So every time you implement a solution using AI and based on certain algorithm, definitely someone is going to figure out how the algorithm is working, and they are going to take advantage and manipulate it to their advantage to do fraud against you. So this is why we always need to make this algorithm evolve and change over time. Look at the different way that someone can recognize this pattern, and we need to look at the unusual pattern that can happen. Number 5 is what we call concept drift, which is a very interesting concept. Concept drift is about changes in the fraud tactics or environmental factor over time, such as the shift in consumer behavior, the shift in regulatory, the shift in system processes, what you are doing. If you don't change your system, the system will be looking at the old way of doing business, will be looking at the old factors to identify fraudulent activities. Because your concepts and your programming and your algorithm is not updated to reflect exactly what happened. So in that way, it will be outdated. It will not give you the accurate result. So this is why it's very important to have continuous adaptation. We need to retrain our system. We need to look at the emerging fraud pattern, and we need to look at it effectively. Number 6 is the lack of contextual understanding. And this is critical and very important. AI system will not understand the context, will only look and analyze the data, which is very interesting. When we are obtaining data related to a phone conversation, the AI system can only identify and listen to the voice, can speak about the tone of the voice, can speak about the language used, but will not understand the meaning. So for example, if the machine is listening to me and I said I have not signed the invoice, the machine will say, well, he was saying a right statement because he was not lying based on his voice and he didn't sign the invoice, so this is what he said. But actually, the question that the interviewer asked me during that interview, did you approve the invoice? What I answer, I say I didn't sign the invoice. So the system say yes, he is saying the truth. Based on his tone, he didn't lie and he didn't sign the invoice. But signing the invoice and approving the invoice is completely different things. Because in our system, approving the invoice, you don't need to sign it. You need to go to the system and just approve it. So this is why we need to understand that AI will not understand the context, will not understand the meaning of what we are saying, will only understand the textual, not the context. So this is why AI system maybe struggle in understanding complex human behavior, looking at contextual clues and human investigation, and will not be able to grasp exactly the meaning of what is being said. This is why they can overlook so many issues, and sometimes they can create legal issues. When someone is saying something that they should not say, or maybe the system identify it as unusual, the system can flag it. And they can say this is a fraudulent transaction, actually it's not. For example, someone in the airport and he is speaking about an issue, sensitive issue. For example, he say, oh, I forgot the gas in my house. The gas? I'm afraid there's an explosion is going to happen. Explosion? So the system immediately say, someone speaking about gas and explosion. We need to go and investigate him. But he's speaking about it in his house because he forgot the gas in his house and he's afraid explosion will happen there. So always we need to understand the context of the information we are analyzing, not only analyze the information itself. Especially when we are looking at social media. We see all this AI system when they are analyzing social media posts, they are just trying to understand what you have said without understanding the context, how you say it, about what. And they are going to flag transaction and they are going to report it, and later we discover they are not fraudulent, they are normal. Number 7 is what we call data imbalance in the database. Sometimes the information that we have, that the AI relying on it to come up with a conclusion is not biased, is not balanced. It's focusing on certain areas, is highlighting certain types of fraud. So in that way, the system will not be able to find all the fraudulent transaction, will only find the classes or the types of transaction that we give to the system. This is why we need to understand when we are trying to build a system to identify fraud, we should not only train the system about what we call the known pattern, the different old fraudulent cases. We need to tell the system, you need to identify any other unusual cases. This is why at the beginning we can have supervised machine based on rules and a set of keywords, set of factors, set of indicators, but after that we need to use unsupervised system where the system will go and look at unusual pattern. And also then we move to deep learning where the system is going connecting with the internet and learning about the new techniques, the new fraud, whatever published in the news, whatever on social media, for the system to be able to look at the fraud that's happening in real time. Number 8 is what we call cultural bias. Sometimes AI system is trained on certain data based on certain demographics, based on certain regions, based on certain culture. And that can create what we call social bias. that can go and give unfair treatment to certain group of individuals or certain nationality, and that can cause a big issue, especially from a legal perspective. Then number 9 is what we call ethical consideration. AI system always they need to navigate the ethical dilemma. When we are speaking about privacy, when we have concern related to the rights of individuals, to the use of data in investigation, to the right for us to look at data and analyze the data and based on it make decision. Very good example, if you are using an AI system to hire an employee, and this AI system is going to look at the employee LinkedIn account, it's going to look at the employee social media information, and based on it, it's going to give us recommendation should we hire the person or not. Do background check on him based on the different data, based on what the system is recommending and not recommending an employee to be hired. For example, the system can look at the employee and say, oh, this employee, it looks like he's on social media and he's sharing certain comments about social media, it looks inappropriate. So based on that, we recommend you not to hire him. The question here, if the person's opinion on social media is important or not important for us to decide if he's qualified to perform his job or not. Or maybe he's saying an opinion on social media is not the same opinion that the organization is saying on their own social media, is thinking about the different political or different social issue and speaking in a different tone. So this is why, is it okay for an AI system to determine it's allowed and not allowed based on these issues? These are the ethical dilemma that AI can face. AI-driven solution can go and invade the privacy of the individual, invade their rights, their liberties, and that can cause an issue, especially when we are speaking about fraud investigation. So as we can see, there are so many issues and so many biases that can happen when we are using AI fraud investigation. But what we need to do, we need to find a way for us to mitigate them. We need to find a way for us to reduce the impact of these biases when we are using artificial intelligence in our investigation. And this can be done to maximize the fairness, the effectiveness of AI in our fraud detection, in our organization. And definitely this can be implemented by following some of these strategies. So let's discuss about some of the strategies that we need to think about when we are implementing this AI artificial intelligence system to ensure that they are not causing any bias or any violation of legal or ethical issues. They say number 1, having diverse and responsive training, diverse and representative training data. When we are giving the data to the AI to analyze, it's very important to make sure that the input data, the training data, the historical data, they are diverse. They represent different demographics groups. They represent different scenarios. They are not biased. Because if you are going to give them biased data, that system is going to be biased. Number 2, we need to make sure we have transparency, creating an AI model where it's transparent, making decision and explaining the reason of this decision, making sure that the system is accountable. If in case the system is giving us a wrong decision for the wrong reason, we need to go and change the system to be able to get the right results. Number 3, we need to make sure we have bias detection and mitigation, like what they are doing in Facebook, in Google, in all these organizations. They have what we call ethical team related to AI ethical team, where they are going to look at their AI, saying, is the AI generating the right result or the wrong result? Look at ChatGPT. ChatGPT, the result that you are getting from ChatGPT is not done from AI only. There are hundreds of employees working behind the scene to be able to validate, to make sure that the AI system is not giving you any inappropriate results. When you are speaking about asking AI a question, is he giving you the proper answer or he is giving you a result that's actually biased? And always we need to make sure we have continuous monitoring and evaluation. Always regulatory will change, regulatory environment will change, the processes inside our organization will change, the different fraud schemes will change, the behavior of our consumers will change. This is why we need, as fraud examiner, to speak with the internal audit and do what we call AI auditing. We need to audit AI to make sure that the system is fair, the system is accurate, the system is representing the processes that we have currently, is representing the current regulation, is looking at the new emerging fraud trends, not outdated. Because so many organizations, they buy the system and they say, khalas, the system is working. No, we need to make sure the system is working in real time today. And also we need to address what we call ethical framework and guidelines. We need to make sure that we have not only implemented AI, but we have an ethical model with this AI to make sure that AI is following certain guidelines and following certain rules. And this is why today we can see so many governments creating what we call AI regulation to ensure that organizations, when they are using this AI system, they are not violating your rights, they are not violating the law, they are not violating the privacy, they are not violating, the ethic of the individual. And all this system, they are transparency and they are respecting the right of individuals. So in conclusion, artificial intelligence represents a powerful tool in the fight against fraud, offering us speed, scalability, and predictive capability. However, it's essential for us to recognize and address all the biases that we have discussed that can impact AI-driven fraud investigation. And by leveraging AI strength, why implementing robust strategy to mitigate the biases, we can harness the full potential of all these safeguard financial system and protect against fraudulent activities. So for us as a fraud examiners, we need to use our own intelligence and we need to use AI, but by addressing all the biases that AI can have and make sure we mitigate them in the proper way to have a successful investigation. So based on what we have discussed today, we can see that the ultimate best solution is to combine human experience with AI advantages. We create what we call the hybrid approach, where we leverage AI data processing, better recognition, while relying on human judgment and complex decision making to make sure we are having the right decision with ethical consideration. But also we need to ensure there's continuous improvement to refine the AI algorithm to make sure that the AI system is accurate, supporting the current fraud trends, to ensure that AI system is not going and violating any ethical issues, any rights. They are transparent and they are accountable, and they are helping us in making sure that we catch fraud and fraudsters in real time. But at the same time, for us as a fraud examiners, we need to be able to train the system on a new different pattern to be able to make sure that humans, fraud examiners, are working together with AI fraud system to be able to play a critical role in preventing, detecting, and investigating fraud in real time. And they are limiting all these biases and limitations. Human and AI can work together to create what we call AI human-driven investigating techniques for us to be able to fight fraud in the proper way. Stay tuned for more anti-fraud rounds in the future that we are going to have over the year. And before you leave, I have a question for you. Please write in the comment, what do you think? What are other advantages related to human investigators and AI system that we have never mentioned in this session that can help us in combating financial crimes, that can help us in ensuring the integrity in our financial system? I look forward to hear from you about what you have to say, and definitely if you don't know, you can always ask ChatGPT. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in our future event.